So today we're going to be covering kind of setting up the Smith Maneuver. We're going to look at a couple case studies of how you can pay down your mortgage faster, because there's not a one-size-fits-all solution with this strategy. And some people want to get really crazy and they want to go for it. Other people just want to try to get a little bit ahead. And we're going to talk a little bit on investing in the Smith Maneuver and homeownership and how it correlates to risk. And my goal is going to be to give you a perspective, a system, or a way to look at these decisions and to decide what works best for you. My goal is not to say that do this, that is wrong. There is no right or wrong decisions in a lot of these situations. And I want to be fair with all of you. I don't know the answers of what's going to happen in the future. No one does. Each strategy, each thing that we're going to cover is going to have pros and cons. And if you have any questions on those, please reach out. I by no means want any of you to perceive that the Smith Maneuver or even making accelerated biweekly payments on your mortgage has no downside, because there's things like opportunity cost. There's whenever you put money towards a certain purpose, it's not going towards others. So I really, really want to give you guys a way to consider what is right and what is wrong for you, to evaluate pros and cons, and to decide what the best fit for your overall goals are. And for those of you that don't know what your overall goals are or why you're worrying about your finances in your future, I also want to give you a little bit of a perspective so you can answer that question, because I really do think it is one of the most important pieces. Really, really is a lot going on in the world right now. I looked it up yesterday. So volatile. I don't know what it's like today, but the stock market, the S&P 500 is down about 15% over the last year. So we're seeing the stock market shift. A lot of investors, particularly younger ones, are experiencing that, hey, the stock market goes down. And some people didn't know that happens. We're seeing real estate starting to slide. Some markets are down as much as 30, 35%. And that is scary stuff. Now, keep in mind, this is from the peak. So when real estate markets rise, maybe 1% of the entire market is selling every month. So when you hit a peak, that peak might only last for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So often it only represents a very, very small sample size of a market. But that does mean that some people bought a home for $1 million and it's worth $650,000 today. And that really sucks. And I want everybody to know that the longer you are involved with real estate or with investing, generally speaking, the lower your risk is. But part of that is knowing there's going to be bad news, times are going to get scary, and we're going to second guess things. And part of it is also admitting that sometimes you're wrong. And a very real example of that is I bought my home May 12th. And as anyone who's followed me knows, I am a very big believer of variable long-term. I got a really cool discount of prime minus 1.19. So I was supposed to, actually prime minus 1.26. 1.19 was the rate I was supposed to get. I was super excited, going to get a mortgage, 1.19%. That's basically free. Yeah, rates started to go up. We did not enjoy a single day of that 1.19 I was looking forward to. About a month ago, I decided to lock in my mortgage. I locked into a 5-year fixed rate. I got 5.09. Yeah, it cost me about $55,000, that figure. But I made the best decision I could at the time. I still stand by the long-term reasons, but as rates started to rise, I really thought about my personal situation. Being a commission-based mortgage broker, a single income household, and having a reasonable percentage of my net worth in real estate, I was in a lose-lose-lose on my worst case scenario with a variable rate mortgage. So I thought about it, I evaluated the worst case scenario, and I realized that, I probably did make the wrong choice. Not because variable is inherently bad, but it just wasn't the right choice for me based on what happened. And things change. So I think it's really, really important as we hear bad news, we see things change, that we're honest and we're fair with ourselves. But that also, it doesn't mean looking back and saying, I should have bought Bitcoin. I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. It doesn't mean I should have taken a fixed rate. I'm an idiot for not not locking in. That's life. And as long as we make our decisions with some sort of system and we consider what we're doing and we have a rationale to why we're doing it, Fair enough. Hey, maybe we learn, maybe we change our decision-making process, but we're not always going to be right. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I want you to get from this, is that this is changing constantly and you need to assess, is this the right choice? But certain things like the Smith maneuver, when you invest, you need to be really sure, because it's a long-term strategy, and locking in a variable into a fixed. I could have done it better in the past, but liquidating your whole portfolio when it's down 40%, that's a life-changing one. So really, really make sure you understand your why and your reasons. And when you make big decisions, like leveraging to invest through the Smith maneuver, buying a rental property, you've really thought it through and you're prepared to stick it out, because there's a lot of real estate investors are learning, a lot of real estate investing groups are learning, a lot of stock market people. It's not always up. So I'm curious, have any of you guys felt the touch of the stress that's going on? Because my clicker works. There we go. One of the things we have to remember is that the scarier the market is, the more we have to consider that the worse things are, usually the better of an opportunity it is. Now, we're not talking the house is on fire and it's going to burn down. We probably don't want to buy that house. But when there's industries that are cyclical, like oil and gas, stock markets, where we know there's bear cycles and there's bull markets, and things go up and they go down, we have to think long term. So one of the biggest things I do to avoid stress is I really, really try to avoid the news. I follow certain experts that I believe in. I follow certain channels. I'll occasionally check out certain news stations just to see what everybody else is seeing. But the headlines are very fear-inducing. And the important thing to know is, an example, the Vancouver market. They've predicted on average since 2011, 2012, that the Vancouver market is going to crash every 2 to 3 months. Hey, sooner or later, somebody's going to be right. But it's important to know that the media they're here to sell something. And often that product is fear. Just like a lot of groups, they sell optimism or hope. One of my goals is to really break things down and approach it neutrally. So the first thing I think you need to do to filter through all this crap is to understand your why. I'm going to touch a little bit on mine just to give you a perspective and let you guys know who I am. So the biggest reason I think the why is important is that it gives you a tool or a metric to gauge, is a decision right for you? Does the choice move you closer to your goals? Does it risk you achieving those goals? Does it help your family? And it kind of gives you like a compass to decide, are certain choices right or wrong? Because there's investments as an example. Google, where should I invest my money? You will find hundreds, if not thousands of options. You put a post on Facebook, you will have dozens of salespeople crawl out of the woodwork. And it's really, really important that you find people that not only are professionals, but align with your vision and your why as well. And I am personally building my business to help my family, being my daughter, my son that's on the way, and my wife, but also to help my parents and my wife's parents. And then secondary to that, I want to be able to help my community. And I'm going to touch a little bit on that a little bit later, because every time I talk about this, it's getting a little more comfortable. People reach out and they actually help me move closer to my goals. So it's important to know the destination that you're working towards. So not only why, in my case, I want to help my family and my community, but you need to know when you want to do it. You need to know how you want to do it. So in the case of my family, as an example, my wife's situation, I want to be able to travel with her one day. As someone from a family where retirement does not exist, I would like to retire one day. And in this day and age, it feels like almost a brash thing to say, because I think retirement for a lot of regular people is moving further and further out of reach. And I know some of you are probably not worried about it, but I know a lot of you are. And if we don't start worrying about this now, it will not happen. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that we make as Canadians and people around the world make. And that is assuming that tomorrow will be a better day. And sometimes it's true, but I'm starting to get gray. I'm getting a little older. I'm realizing I'm closer to 40 than I am to 20. And you realize that years start flying by. My daughter turns 3 next month, and I don't know how that happened. I really don't. And I'm willing to bet that before I know it, she's going to be on her way to 10. My son's going to give me attitude. He's not even born yet. So I really do think that we need to look at our timelines and make sure that it's okay to say, I will deal with something tomorrow, next month, 6 months, but to put some sort of system in place, even if it's a mark on your calendar where you say, I will revisit this question. Quickly put, other things I'm trying to do is I want to help my kids buy a home one day, because I think it's going to be harder for people to get into housing. And I think owning or renting is going to be more expensive. Being proactive about it's important. When my wife and I got married, which is the bottom left photo, we received a little bit of help from our family. It was extended family that we didn't expect, but we planned our wedding thinking we had to pay for everything. We kept it really cheap. Like, I think our total wedding, all said and done, cost like $3,500. 2/3 of that was my wife's dress. So happy wife, happy life, I've been told. But I would really like to help my kids with when they get married so they can enjoy the day and not be stressed about it. And I see clients get themselves in situations where reaching certain life goals, like helping their kids get married, helping their kids go to school, which is my last goal, or helping their kids get married, cripples them financially. And one of the hardest things for me as a broker is when I have clients that have stated their goal is to do something, it's like helping their kids. And I know, and they know, it's going to completely crush their other dreams. And they're forced to choose between what they're going to do. And often as parents, we ended up choosing what's best for our kids rather than ourselves. Well, my goal is to hopefully get in a position where I don't have to compromise, or at least as much. And I hope to put you in a situation where if you're hoping to help your family as well, you don't have to compromise. Now, it's important to know, what is your why? Talked about mine, but I really suggest if you've got a piece of paper in front of you, if you're considering what you're going to do after this, one of the biggest things you need to be able to answer is, what is your why? When is your why? What does it look like? Is it $1 million? Is it 10 million? Is it $8,000 a month? But to know what it is and to know when it needs to be, because once we know that, we can start measuring your progress towards it. And I really, really know that I'm not alone in worrying about my future, my family's future, my community. So one of the reasons I do this is that I have calls every day with regular people, not rich, maybe not poor, but regular people. And I know that this is on a lot of our minds. And I hope that through this, you'll be in a position where you can build a better future for yourself. So one of the things that I keep getting asked, because particularly people that are in the industry or put on events realize how much time all of this takes. Building out presentations, coordinating everybody, setting up all the logistics and emails. So I'm very big on being transparent. I thought I'd share why I'm doing this real quick. One is to grow my business. My business partner, Scott Brennan, and I are 100% referral based. And hey, we like to make a living. This is how I reach my goal. But I get to choose as a business owner how I reach my goal. And I don't want to be a realtor. I don't want to put my face on bus benches and advertise. I want to be referral based. And the way that I want to earn those referrals and to get people to talk about our business is by helping. So that means educating, means being available, answering questions, taking the time to deal with the 73-year-old lady who's worried about her $32,000 line of credit because rates are going up. And I know that I will never get business from her, but it's the right thing to do. And the last reason, which I alluded to earlier, is I have a big goal that I want to reach that's not my immediate family. And I'll share a little bit about this. I don't want to make this too emotional, but there's 2 people in my family, my dad and my uncle, that have been on the street due to drugs for about 20 years. And I've been through started when I was about 8. And we all kind of tipped our hats and gave up when I was about 14. But I know that there are a lot of people that, whether it's directly or through family members, have been affected by homelessness in general, whether it's mental illness or it's through drugs. And whether you know or not, the system sucks. Your best case scenario is that someone goes to rehab, they spend 6 weeks, 12 weeks getting clean. And this is usually after a 6-month waiting list. Then they get out, and either you take them in your household and deal with someone who is like a feral animal almost. They've lost themselves. They don't know how they want to act. Their entire world has been consumed by something, a drug usually, that's more important than life itself, than their family. And often they end up back in their community. The only option that's really out there other than family taking them in is something called a halfway house. And it sucks. You throw a bunch of drug addicts in a poorly funded house, usually in a rough part of town. It's like throwing a bunch of paper in the fireplace and throwing matches at it. Sooner or later, someone relapses, the whole thing goes up. Everybody's an addict again. You get to reset. That's why in my case with my dad, rehab happened 5 times. And then we finally just, what do you do? Certain point, it's someone's life choice. But long story short, my goal is to get a large acreage, maybe somewhere in Alberta, and create something that's new, a transition program for people after they get out of rehab, where they can spend 6 months just getting their life together, be far enough away from town. It's not a bad influence. And then for the next 6 months, hopefully I can use my connections and my relationships and the people I meet, and the reasons I share this message, to get them ready to get them back in the world, and hopefully give them the skill set to be valuable again, to feel good about themselves, to build a community. And I know that I'm not going to be able to save everybody. I have no complex about that, but my goal is to do something different and hopefully prove that this works, because I think that people need a sense of community. They need a fresh start, but they also need to be far enough away to really reset. So that's my why. And that's the last of you hear about that, but let's get into the good stuff now. So one of the important things to know, whether you're buying a home to live in, or you're doing the Smith Maneuver, or you're investing in real estate, or even just putting money into your RSPs for your future, is what is investing. Now, I think the most important thing to accept about investing is that it is the calculated management of risk in exchange for profit. So ultimately, as investors, we are problem solvers. Whether it's a company going public, someone raising money to renovate a rental property, whether it is starting a business, at the end of the day, there are problems in the world, and investors try to solve them. One of the biggest mistakes that many investors make, though, is that they forget the risk management part. They think investing is making money, and that is a slippery and dangerous slope. If you start worrying about the money you will make, you start losing sight of what you can lose. And it's important that when you invest, or you buy a home, or you put money into your RSPs, whatever it may be, that you're understanding what can happen, you know the consequences, and you're in a position to deal with them, adapt them, overcome them, or live with them. And the biggest mistake I see people make, the biggest pitfall, is when people are unaware of risks they're taking, whether it's tax risk, changes in the market, changes in rates. So I think the biggest thing you can do is approach whatever choices you make financially with, you are managing risk in exchange for return. And the higher the risk, the higher that potential return better be. Now, I want to share with you guys a little something fun that puts things in perspective. So when I was 21, I went skydiving. You can't guess which one I am. I'm the one on the right. Believe it or not, I'm 5'11". Apparently, my friends are all just really tall. But I decided to go skydiving, and we didn't go tandem. We did a solo jump. So the first jump I did was out of a plane, a lot like that. Now, you'll see there's the wing, and you see that strut that goes to the body of the plane. Now, behind that was a door. And the first jump, you jump from about 5,000 feet. So there's about 6 hours of training. They show you to put your parachute on. They go through what if your parachute doesn't open? What if it opens partially? What are the signals if you're in trouble? They talk about steering the parachute, which is one of the funnest parts. And you're excited, you're nervous. Well, like public speaking, actually. And ultimately, it's time to go. You get on the plane. You got a couple instructors with you, and plane starts to go up. Now, for the first jump, what you had to do was the door opened and you had to grab the strut and hang off the strut where your feet are dangling like you're Superman. And you have to wait. You have to look back at the instructor, look forward, look back at the instructor, look forward, and then let go. Let me tell you, it's nerve-wracking. 5,000 feet up, you're flying through the air at a couple hundred kilometers an hour. It's kind of cool. I decided I really liked it. So that was me a week later. I decided to do my second solo jump. Now this time's from 13,500 feet. The first jump, when you go, the chute opens. The guy has your chute release right away. So you jump, your chute opens within about 5 seconds. and you parachute down. Second jump, not so much. You free fall from about 13,500 feet for about 45, 50 seconds. You have two people jump with you, and that's me. Now, you're falling through the air. It's super fun. I decided I wouldn't show you guys the video, but if you want, message me, I'll send you the video. You got to do some tests, because at the end of the day, this is licensing. So you have to practice the movement. My feet were a little too far forward, so I had to learn to kick them back. But you're working on developing a skill. Now you're doing it in a controlled way. There's two instructors there. They're hanging on to you. When I first jumped, we lost the first instructor. We spun out of control, but I had it. Now, if I was on my own, I would have been hooped. I probably would have spiraled my way all the way to the ground. But there was that instructor there. He was able to stabilize us. The other one came back. I did my drills. I ended up opening the parachute, and I eventually landed. Both my friends, both times, face planted when they landed. I got really lucky. If you have to flare your chute right before you land, and you have to do it really close to the ground. If you do it when you're about 15 feet up, which feels real close because you're still going down about 30, 35 kilometers an hour when you're landing with a parachute. If you flare your chute too early, you get a temporary lift up, and then you start to go fast again, and you face plant, and they both did it. I got kind of lucky, and I've done a lot of risk-taking activities in my life, like scuba diving, skydiving. I was in the military when I was younger, used to box competitively. But long story short, that was me skydiving. And I think a lot of you are wondering right now, why is he sharing this? Well, skydiving is a lot like investing, owning a home. And that is in the sense, you have to take risk. Throwing yourself out of a perfectly good airplane with a parachute has risks. There's no way you can do it where 1,000,000 out of 1,000,000 times you will be safe. If you throw yourself from a plane enough times, something will go wrong. Now, maybe it's your parachute doesn't open. Maybe that happens 1 in 1,000 times. But hey, there's a secondary parachute. And you start getting into pretty crazy odds that something really goes wrong. And it is pretty rare, but there's a risk we take, whether it's driving our cars, throwing ourselves out of perfectly good airplanes. But at the end of the day, when we make these life decisions, we're taking calculated risk. Often we calculate that risk through, do other people do it? Is it economically viable? Example, there are skydiving businesses. If disasters happen all the time, those businesses would not exist. But by surrounding ourselves with the right team, the right structure, the right processes, we can do something like throwing ourselves out of a plane, which would be fatal 100% of the time with no preparation. And we can use that preparation to make it so it's maybe a 1 in 1,000,000 risk. Real estate investing, the Smith Manoeuvre, home ownership, it's all the same. We've got to take calculated risks, and with the right systems and processes, we can minimize them. We will never eliminate them, because if you could eliminate the risk, you would basically make infinite money. That's not life. But the biggest thing is that we can't avoid all the risks in the world. Even making no choices, never investing, we are taking on a risk. And that risk is we may not have enough money when we retire. That risk is maybe we sit on a ton of cash because you can't lose cash. Well, as many of us are learning, there's something called inflation. And you absolutely can lose cash in the form of you lose buying power. So be aware, you cannot avoid all of the risks out there, but you can choose the risks you take. And as I said earlier, the goal of this is to give you guys a system, to give you the tools so that you can move forward with clarity, and you can decide and you can interpret what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. One of the things I want to touch on is the current conditions, because on the topic of risks, there's a lot of risks out there right now. There's also a lot of opportunity. Rates are rising, as we all know. Values are dropping. Inflation's running away. And I spend probably 8, 9, 10, 12, 20 hours a week, depending on the week, talking to other professionals, whether they're financial planners, exempt market dealers, people that run hedge funds, realtors, brokers, lawyers, accountants. And I ask everybody, what are you doing? The consensus is that nobody has a silver bullet for what's going on. One of the best takeaways that I've come up with and that I've observed is that some of the best people are still engaging in higher risk strategies, but they're offsetting that by trying to have 20 different pools of investments in 20 different things and different strategies. Warren Buffett's a big believer of you take only a few very, very calculated risks. But that's also from the perspective of someone that invests for a living and is one of the most successful investors alive. For mere mortals like myself, I do enjoy the diversification strategy. And I think that it's probably a reasonable approach for you to research as well. At the end of the day, you need to make your own decisions, talk to your own experts, but do know that conditions are changing. One of the risks that comes with conditions changing is not losing money. It is, as rates are rising and policies are changing, the buying power of Canadians in the real estate market right now is eroding. So January 1st, interest rates were lower. Someone making $100,000 could realistically expect to qualify 20% down for about a $650,000 mortgage. As of today, that same individual will qualify for about $505,000. Now, that is someone with a clean slate, buying a home to live in. You can do things like have a basement suite in the property that'll boost it up. There's certain ways that it can be pushed a little bit, but all in all, we've lost about 30% of our purchasing power. Now, I know a lot of you are real estate investors. You're not going to like this, but real estate investors are being impacted even more because real estate investors often have multiple layers of debt. They may have rental properties. They may have lines of credit. They often use leverage more. Each property that has been impacted by the rising rates also drags into their qualifying power. I've seen some real estate investors lose 50, 60, 70% of their qualifying power. And I've seen even more real estate investors lose all of their qualifying power. At first, that sounds a little weird, but it's important to know that think of your debt servicing like a container. And as you take on debt, the level rises. There's a certain point where they say you will not cross this line or you do not qualify. For some real estate investors, they have enough debt exposure that with payments rising due to interest rates going up, they're significantly over that max line. One of the most frustrated things that people say to me is, but it's only $100,000. It's only $200,000. What do you mean I don't qualify? The problem is that qualifying for a mortgage, your entire income and debt situation, including your rental properties, is lumped together. So if you're buying a rental property, even if you're putting 80% down and it is going to pay you $5,000 a month after all expenses, no matter how conservatively you look at it, if the lender sees it that you're if you're over the maximum debt servicing before we even look at the property, other than very like 1 in 100 situational cases, you're hooped. The reason I share this is I know some of you have invested in pre-sales. If you have a pre-sale you have not closed on, I'm going to assign it as not a valid exit strategy. You need to make sure that you get guaranteed financing. Even if it's 3 to 5 years from closing, you can get guaranteed financing where the appraisal is done by floor plan and the rate is guaranteed. Now, some of you may be wondering, but I work with a broker. Why haven't I heard about this? These products are outside the mortgage broker channel and do not pay mortgage brokers. This is one of the reasons why Scott and I have almost 50% of our business go outside the broker channel where we do not get paid, even though we do all of the work. Because our goal is to do what's best for our clients, no matter what, even if it's not good for our business and we don't get paid. So if you have a pre-sale and you do not have guaranteed financing where the appraisal and all of the approvals done and paperwork is ready to go to the lawyers with a guaranteed interest rate, you probably should really, really, really get that. Because I hope that rates stop going up. I hope the market stops going down. But hope is not a plan for an investor. It is our job to manage risk. If you take one thing away from this, you do not ignore risks when there are tools you can use to mitigate them. It's what will separate you from being a good investor versus an average one versus a terrible one. One of the things we need to do is to shield ourselves from rising interest rates. And I think the biggest thing that we can do as Canadians, as homeowners, as people in general, is be aware of what's going on. Now, when it comes to rising rates, there are those with unsecured debts. That's usually the biggest thing to deal with. We want to figure out what the overall cost is, and we want to systematically eliminate the highest cost debts. The fact that most of you are here spending a Wednesday evening learning about tax strategies and investing, I'm going to assume that most of you don't fall into that category. or at least its fringe benefit is probably more the family you're worrying about. But we all, or many of us, have mortgages. And many of us, well, all of us, are, unless we're going to pay off our mortgage in the next 3 years, have either a renewal date coming up or we're in some sort of variable product. So even if you're in a fixed, yeah, you get to feel good that you locked in at 2%, but it's not immunity from rising rates, and you must be aware. Making changes to adapt and overcome what's going on takes time. The best thing you can do, and if you need it, you can send me a message. We'll send you a tool on this, is do a personal budget for your household. And I know it's not sexy. I know it's boring, but you must do it. It's one of the most important things you can do as an investor to start building a stable foundation. Build that budget, figure out what your surplus income is before you pay for any mortgage expenses. You get that number, I will take it for you, and I will translate that. I need to know your debt levels as well, and I can tell you at what interest rate you hit that disposable income. For some of you, it might be 6.1%. You need to worry. If you're in a variable rate mortgage and you are within, rates are at 5.75 is prime now. A lot of people are basically paying 5.75. Locking in is around 5.5 to 6% right now. So if your breaking point is 6.1%, we should have had this conversation 6 months ago. And I'm sorry if I let you down on that, or I'm sorry if we just met. But today is still better than 3 weeks from now. If your breaking point's 15%, great. You're in a position where you don't have to worry about rising rates so much. But there's still a couple caveats to it. One, is it worth taking the risk of those rates rising? And two, the thing that made me ultimately give up a really, really good variable was my income was pretty great some years, but some years not so much. I'm a commission-based mortgage broker, and my income's tied to real estate, is tied to rates rising. And I realized that, yeah, on paper, I shouldn't worry. I'm a perfect candidate for a variable. But in reality, the circumstances of my income and how I make a living make me a 10 out of 10 risk for variable. And if this is me on my own situation, 8 years in the industry, I think it's important that everybody takes a quick thought. We're all worried about rising rates right now, but why are they rising rates? Inflation. Well, how do they fight inflation? They raise interest rates to make it so that people essentially get really, really scared to spend money. Businesses stop expanding. People don't go to Starbucks. Industries start to contract. What comes after rising rates? Recession. It's already been on a lot of the news's lips, probably coming. And that's fine. We don't need to be scared. We don't need to lose sleep, but we need to be practical. With a recession comes jobs being cut. And with jobs being cut, we have to ask ourselves, how stable is our industry? How stable is our employment? If there's one useful thing that we learned from COVID, it is that industries can change quickly. People that have been at jobs for 20 years can get a notice that, hey, you can't come into work tomorrow. And I don't say this to scare you. I don't say this to worry you. But I say this as someone who believes that we all have to be practical. We have to be realistic. We have to be aware. I personally find a warm, fuzzy blanket. I find comfort. I sleep easy at night, knowing that I've considered the risks, I've evaluated them, and I've taken all the reasonable steps I can to mitigate them. Realistically, we're all going to have to accept that we can't eliminate and avoid all risks. But hey, if we're ahead of the game, if we're aware and we're proactive, we did our best. Sometimes shit happens, and sometimes you get unlucky, but you can't worry about that. Now, one of the biggest debates, one of the biggest things that people worry about right now is, should they stay variable? Should they stay fixed? And the short answer is there's no right choice. One of the reasons that I struggled for so long with locking in is that every time I considered staying variable, every time I considered locking into a fixed, neither option was a good one. Do I guarantee this high rate for 3, 4, 5 years? Do I take a 2-year fixed, minimize or mitigate the risk of that higher rate if interest rates drop, but then risk that in 2 years, maybe rates are even higher and I do not have control of my destiny. I'm falling from the sky financially, and I'm in a position where I'm going to renew and there's nothing I can do. I can either pay a penalty and take an even higher rate, or I can just wait and hope. Or do I stay variable? and I don't risk that rates drop. That's my win, but I bet the rates don't rise. So some of the big things that we need to consider are the penalties. Fixed rates tend to have 5 to 10 times larger penalties if we break a mortgage than variable rates. So if you think there's a very good chance that you're going to break your mortgage, you're going to pay it off, then you do not want to lock into a fixed rate. Now, a common real world situation where this comes up is you've had your home for 10, 15 years, you have a shorter amortization. Maybe you bought your home with 5% down. You have a short-ish amortization. Well, if you lock into a fixed rate and you haven't run your budget and your payments go up from a variable, which is almost guaranteed, you didn't do your homework. What if that payment's higher than you can afford? You're going to call a broker like me. You're going to say, what are my options? Well, not really a whole lot we can do to lower your payment. But if your amortization's been shortened, one of the most common things is we'll extend it out. Well, the catch with that is extending your amortization means breaking the mortgage. It means paying the penalty. So something to think about. We do our budgets. We know what the payment will be when we lock in. We're going to know, hey, that's not cool. That's right at the brink of what I can do. And as a broker, it's going to be my job to say, okay, well, these are our options. These are the compromises we can make. One of them is extending amortization. Maybe it drops your payment $1,000 a month. That is why it's important that we have to be aware and proactive. Another one is trigger rates. There's two things. There's a trigger rate and a trigger point. And I might confuse these, but the trigger rate is the interest rate where so I guess let me take one step back, everyone. I'm getting excited. There are two types of floating rate mortgages. There's an adjustable rate mortgage and a variable rate mortgage. The adjustable rate mortgage will have payments rise and fall as rates go up and down. So those people, they're staying on track for their amortization. And there's a group of people in floating rate mortgages, some of them gloating, that my payment's the same it was 2 years ago. Oh, lucky me. Well, there's a cost to that. Those people are making interest only right now. Some of them have passed their trigger rate. They are paying less than interest only. Their debt level is actually creeping up. There's something you can hit eventually called a trigger point. Now, there's a few different ways it's looked at. One of them is that you owe more than 80% of the market value of your property. So if values drop, the lender can go, oh, hey, John, you owe 680,000 and 650 is 80% of market value now. Yeah, you're gonna have to come up with 30 grand, please. We'll give you 60 days. Yeah, otherwise we're gonna foreclose. Not a good situation. Another one is that loan creeps up to beyond 80% of what you had originally. So if you got a mortgage for 800,000, you paid it down a bit. Maybe you're like me, you got a mortgage in May, you never really got to enjoy that good payment. Well, if it creeps up past 80% of what the original borrowing was, they're going to do the same thing. It's essentially a cash call. The problem is that when it happens, they want their money and they want it now. So please understand what you're in and be aware that understanding those risks lets you make decisions to manage those risks. Now, I have a solution for you, for some of you at least. This is what I did personally, so I can't say it's right or wrong. It was the best worst case scenario in my opinion. It certainly wasn't the best choice because I don't know the future, but I was able to predict what my worst case was, which is interest rates drop, which as a mortgage broker and as someone who owns a house, hey, interest rate dropping is probably actually a pretty good thing for me because interest rates dropping means hopefully my values go up, hopefully my income goes up. So I can live with a loss on, hey, I'm locked in at 5.09, rates are 4%, too bad. But I took it a step further because it's my job for myself and my clients to figure out what is the most tactical or strategic way we can approach a problem. I took a fully readvanceable mortgage product, one that allows multiple mortgages and multiple lines of credit. And I negotiated really hard to get a HELOC at prime. Now, I also made sure I got 20% prepayment plus the ability to double every single mortgage payment I make. So I can prepay about 22, 23% of the original mortgage amount every single year without penalty. Now, because I have multiple line of credit components, if rates drop, I can use my line of credit, start paying down my mortgage, effectively getting myself out of that 5.09 and into whatever prime is. The only reason I would do this is that prime has dropped. Maybe it's 3, 4, 5. Well, in my worst case scenario, I can't avoid being locked in a higher rate, but I can start converting debt over. And that lets me minimize my worst case. And that's a real world example of how I suggest people approach the problems they're facing. Sometimes there's not perfect solutions, but hey, with the right planning and awareness, you can take a decision like locking in and significantly minimize your worst case scenario. If rates drop, I'll go from being about a $50,000 oops to I can mitigate it to about a $25,000 oops. So I can cut my worst case scenario in half. Now, one of the things you have to be aware of, just with this specific strategy as an example, is that if you're implementing the Smith Maneuver, which setting up the Smith Maneuver is also setting up the product that would work for this, you are going to be investing for tax deductible purposes or borrowing to create tax deductions with the Smith Maneuver. Paying down your expensive fixed rate with a HELOC is not tax deductible. If you did it on a rental property, if you did this strategy on a rental, you could talk to your accountant and it would probably work, but double check. But if you do this on your primary residence, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is not tax deductible. So make sure you don't cross-pollinate or mix that debt if you ever did do this. Now, please don't just go do this. Please talk to a professional and make sure that you set things up correctly. Now, one of the reasons I share this with you is that I think that 2022, the last part of it in 2023, are really, really going to be years of change. And it's important to know that real estate's cyclical. These changes are going to come and go. And you really, really must stay alert as things are changing, because it's possible that it's cyclical in the sense that we go back to 2010 style. Things are more or less like we experienced. We get a nice run up of real estate, rates gradually drop, real estate values rise, stock market rises. There's also a chance that maybe this period of change leads to something different. Maybe we go into a 10-year recession. Maybe due to global warming and the world changing its policies for the environment being a priority, maybe we see the economy shrink for a long period of time. We don't know. That's just the reality of it. We can think about it. We can discuss it. We can try to, if maybe we make 20 pools of investments, we can make so 3 or 4 of those cater towards what if there is a long recession? What if shifting towards environmentally friendly becomes a major, major priority and they start killing industries to do it? Well, as an investor, we can move some of our resources to that what if. Now, the best thing you can do is know your numbers inside and out to deal with this change. It doesn't mean looking at Yahoo Finance every day. It might mean once every month, once every quarter, every 3 or 4 months, checking that, hey, you're on track to your budget. Because I don't know if you all know this, but budgeting doesn't mean tracking every single receipt. It doesn't mean tracking every single dollar that goes in and out. I really suggest you do that for the first couple of months. But the way that I budget now is that I just live my life. I don't really worry about it. I track big expenses. I track when I put money into investments. Otherwise, I live my life and I make sure that I have certain metrics. I want to see a certain amount of money go into my kid's contingency account. I want to make sure that the balance on my checking account, because I'm self-employed and I pay myself not every single week, I want it to go down at a certain rate. And then when I replenish it, I want it to go up to a certain level. And if all of a sudden I notice my bank account's dropping really, really fast, that means I got to go through and dig through those receipts and figure out where I'm spending the money. And you can do the same thing too. Maybe you set $5,000 as kind of the zero on your checking account. And every month, you should not go below the $5,000. The goal is it grows a little bit. And if all of a sudden you notice for 3 months in a row, you start dropping, okay, that means you got to go open up the budget. You got to cross-reference. Maybe it's your utility bills went up. Who knows? But there are ways that you can be effective with your time on this. And you can really, really get the benefits of tracking things without the perceived obsessing every month. Oh, I got to look at the paperwork and I got to stress about it. And for what it's worth, as someone who gets really, really bad anxiety and panic attacks and the whole 9 yards, this taking control of my finances, but in a way where I manage the amount of time I put towards it, has really, really taken the weight off my shoulders. The relentless stressing about my parents and my family, well, knowing that, hey, I'm doing my best to try to solve that problem really makes it easier for me to just say, well, I'm doing my best. I'm not going to worry about it. People are going to do what people are going to do. And I think the last thing you can do is, if you're an investor and you own rental properties, or you have a variable rate mortgage, or you have a renewal coming, is understanding the relationship of rates rising and what that means for you financially. Rough metric: for every $100,000 you owe, every 0.25% increase is going to represent about $13 a month in interest. It's rough, it's simple, but it's relatively accurate. If you got $1 million mortgage, then you know that every 0.25% means $130 a month. And pretty quickly, you'll know if, like, ooh, 130, that's a lot of money. That would suck. That would start to really input our buying groceries. Okay, that's high alert. You're like, that's fine. I'm not really worried about it. Great, perfect, as long as you're aware. So the flip side, though, is if you do not keep your eyes open, you may find yourself in a position where you miss the opportunity. Because I know that a lot of this has been kind of cautious and conservative, but that's my approach as an investor. I really, really try to focus on the risks and how I can manage them. But I am an investor. I want to make money. I invest. When oil crashed in 2014, I invested in oil and gas. When Britain left the EU, I invested in British banks. Don't get me wrong, I take risks, but I take it with the amounts of money that I can afford to gamble with, and I think it through. So know that when there's change, when things get scary, there's also opportunity. And for real estate investing as an example, if the market drops and people get in tough situations, there are strategies like agreement for sale, rent to owns, vendor take back mortgages that can offer, relatively speaking, win-wins, where the seller is in a better position than they would be with a traditional method. As an investor, you're bringing them a solution, and you're going to make money because you're providing a solution that they weren't aware of, that most people don't learn about. So keep in touch with others around. One of the things I'm going to talk about a little later is a community that we're going to be building that's not about real estate investing. It's not about investing, but rather kind of like holistic financial well-being, estate planning, managing risk, budgeting, saving. How do you cut those stupid bank account fees that charge you $25 every month? And just general awareness of how can we all make steps and take actions that are going to make our lives a little easier, a little better, and get us to a better point in the future. Now, I want to give you some actionable steps, the order of operations of how things work and how you reevaluate. Is there's 4 real pillars. One of them is your vision, is understanding what your why is, when it is, and you're going to adjust this. You're going to evaluate it over time. Maybe you have an unexpected kid. Maybe your kid's really upset you. You said, you know what? You've moved down the priority list, and I'm going to Mexico once a year when I retire now. Who knows? Things change, and that's your choice. But my goal is that you get the choice to decide what's right for you. And you build a team that fits into your vision. Your team will help you build a plan based on your vision. Then you will implement based on your plan built by your team on your vision. So it's why it's the important foundational piece, because as an expert who specializes in this type of topic, I kind of play traffic control for clients. I can't answer all your questions, but I can help you understand what those questions are. I can help you refine them, figure out which expert's going to answer them. Maybe it's the accountant, maybe it's the estate expert, maybe it's the lawyer. And I can help you save money by narrowing down exactly what that question is. So in 30 seconds, you can get your point across. It's articulated in a way they understand it, and then they can give you an actionable answer, and off you go. And odds are that call is probably free. You can keep it quick. But it's just one of the examples of where your vision really matters and makes your life easier. And as you go through it all, it's going to change, it's going to evolve, and it's going to adapt. But at least it gives you a starting point. You're going to constantly learn. But one of the things to know is that you're not alone in this. You're not. I'm not alone. Even as a broker giving advice, I'm not alone. I rely on other experts, even other brokers that specialize in little nuances that I don't specialize in. Like commercial financing a 100-unit apartment building. I know a lot about it. I've spoken on it. I educate people on it, but I'm not an expert of the little details of how do you get around this one obstacle. And I rely on people. You've all got day jobs. You've got families. Worrying about how you retire, how you pay less taxes, how you take care of your kids. That's not your day job. Not what you're going to obsess about. And the goal is that you can surround yourself with people, with experts that will take that weight off your shoulders and that will help you know that you're doing everything you can to solve it. But they're the ones that are going to read through the changes in the industry. They're the ones that are going to worry about your situation and how to tweak it. And when you see some news article coming out about taxes are increasing for inheritance, don't worry about it. Hey, be aware of it. Maybe send your person an email, but know that if you pick the right team, they're passionate about it. They're already on it. They knew it was going to change 4 weeks ago. They're already staying up late at night, already trying to figure out what the best solution is. And hey, you don't have to stress about it. You got people on it. But the biggest thing that I see separate really, really successful investors and people in life in general, whether even if they're building a business, is that they do not try to be the expert of everything. They find 1 or 2 people they can trust, they can really, really trust, that they resonate with, that have similar values, and they rely on them for what they're good at. And then they can, you're a team, you're 2 people. Now you can evaluate another professional you're considering. And one example is every single expert I've introduced you to through this series: Andrew Schulhoff, Robinson Smith, Mr. Graham Plum, and Chris Harrison. They're all very similar to myself. They all care about what they're doing. They're planning for their family. They all go above and beyond to help their clients. They all implement the strategy. Each is a little different goals, different reasons, different whys, but similar people. So you'll find that when you find that right expert, that person that clicks with you, they will likely be surrounded by other people like them, and can really make your life easier. So it's important to think of your team a bit like a rope. You know, each individual strand is not that strong, but when it's wound together and combined and working as one unit, it is almost unbreakable. A real world example of how that benefits you is having your broker, your lawyer, your planner, and your accountant all connected and all communicating. It means they're going to start giving you the best advice for your goals and your situation rather than the best advice for their world. They're going to start to overlap and combine their expertise to get you to your goal better and more practically than simply the way to pay the least tax, the way to get the most mortgages, the way to give as much money to your kids. They're going to find the compromise for you. Now, it's important to know that life is, we get to make choices. And I want to quickly go through a case study with you guys on the Smith Maneuver and what it can look like, but also what another option is. So all of these numbers are based on a very generic case study of a couple in their 30s, make about $160,000 a year, homes worth $750,000, and they owe about $550,000 at 5.5%. So the first scenario, accelerated biweekly payments. Now, it's important to note that biweekly and accelerated biweekly are not the same thing, but simply by making accelerated biweekly, which is half your monthly payment 26 times a year, you can cut your total interest cost by roughly 16%. So by doing that, this couple could not only save over $110,000, but they could be mortgage free 5 years sooner, which means that they've got about $37,000 to reinvest for retirement, to live off of, to retire early. But they've got $37,000 that was going to mortgage payments and all of a sudden isn't because the mortgage is gone. So that's the power of making one extra monthly payment a year. And one of the things that isn't often talked about is that most people assume that accelerated biweekly does magic because you're paying twice a month. No. It's the people who get into the compound interest explanation and, oh, it's because you're paying down the debt more often. It's BS. It's complete crap. The reason for that is you could make monthly payments and you could double one monthly payment a year. You would pay 8% extra down. You would put an extra 8% payments towards your debt. It's the exact same amount of money as accelerated biweekly, and within like $20 at the end of your mortgage, you get the exact same result. So it's not the magic of paying more frequently. It's the magic of you pay a little extra, a little sooner. Now, the next example is they could take that exact same situation, making accelerated biweekly payments, and they could implement the basic plain Jane Smith maneuver. Apologize, everybody. I'm still fighting off a cold, so that's why I'm making funny faces and get a little nasally. But if they implemented the plain Jane Smith maneuver, This is on the assumption of their 5.5% mortgage for 30 years, and they're reinvesting at 8%. And the key thing here is that they're going to get certain tax refunds by implementing the Smith Maneuver. They're reinvesting those refunds, and they're doing that by paying down the non-tax deductible debt, then reborrowing to invest in a tax deductible way. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but the big takeaways that excite me: their mortgage is fully tax deductible in 22 years. It means after that, they get to write off every dollar of interest they ever pay. They're creating nearly a $1.4 million portfolio, assuming they earn 8% a year, and they're improving their overall net worth by almost $1 million. This can be done, this exact scenario, with no new money from your day-to-day lifestyle, by simply making your mortgage payment every month. The rest happens behind the scenes, and the increased efficiency in the mortgage will cover the costs of the home equity line of credit. Now, if you go that route, rates are actually going to rise and fall. So maybe it's $700,000 of net worth improvement. Maybe the stock market underperforms, it's $400,000 improvement. I don't know. I don't know the future, but I do know it's in a positive direction. I can't speak for you, but I want that money because I know that I'm going to use it for my family. And to decide if I'm going to do it, I assess the risks and I make sure I understand the strategy. So one of the things that a lot of people get confused on is, how does the money actually flow? What accounts exist? So I got Robinson Smith to get me a diagram so I could show it to you. Now, your personal income comes in. So you're going to follow the diagram from the top left. You pay yourself, you put it in your normal checking account. You make your mortgage payment. Pretty straightforward stuff so far. As you pay down your mortgage, your line of credit limit is going to grow. You borrow off that line of credit. You put it into the Smith Manoeuvre checking account. That's a fancy word for an account you create that will only do two things. One, you will borrow off your line of credit for investment purposes and put it in that Smith Manoeuvre account and then move the money to whatever your investments are. And two, you will take money off that line of credit for investment purposes, move it to the checking account, the Smith Manoeuvre checking account. Then you will take the money and bring it back to pay off the line of credit. Those are the only two uses you will ever use for that account. So I'm going to say it one more time, nice and clearly, because this is one of the points where a lot of people get confused. You will borrow money off your investment line of credit. You'll put it into your dedicated investment checking account. Then you will put it into your investments. The only other thing you will do is you can use that checking account, the money you have in there that came from your investment line of credit. You can use that money to pay for the investment line of credit interest. Now, personally, I prefer to pay for the interest on that line of credit through my own personal savings. I just prefer it. It eats a little bit into my lifestyle, but I budget for it. But technically, the most efficient way to do it would be to take that money, pay down your non-tax deductible mortgage with it. It's going to increase the limit on your line of credit. Then you're going to move it over to that checking account and move it back to pay, because you're minimizing your non-tax deductible debt and maximizing your tax deductible debt. And this is a strategy of inches, not miles. It's about where can you take every single little benefit to minimize your interest and tax cost and to get money working for you sooner for retirement. The last one, and this is what I'm doing personally, is the Smith Maneuver with cash damming, which requires getting an investment property. So I ran these numbers on a scenario and I kept this real basic. You buy an investment property that rents for $5,000 a month, and the property costs $4,500 a month to own. So that means you get an extra $500 a month to do with as you like. Everything else is the exact same, 8% investment assumption, but you implement something called cash damming. Now, cash damming, and I'm going to show a breakdown of this in 2 seconds, but the only difference is that you take the rental revenue from your investment property. You have to own this personally. You take that revenue and you pay down your non-tax deductible mortgage on your home with it. Then you reborrow it and pay for those $4,500 a month in expenses. The other $500 a month, instead of going towards expenses on your rental property, would instead get reinvested for retirement. Now, what I like about this strategy is that by flowing money as efficiently as possible and focusing on minimizing your taxes and interest and getting it deployed sooner for investing for retirement, it's almost $2 million. It's almost $400,000 of tax savings for this couple. And it's a huge advantage. So it's why I've done this whole series. It's why I do it for my own family. It's a way that I can be a normal human being and not make $1 million a year to retire, which is what it feels like it takes. And I can take the pieces on the board. I can realistically plan on buying a residence. And I can realistically plan on saving up and using the Smith Manoeuvre to buy a rental property. And then I can just let it run. I can work, live my life. I can make my mortgage payment, put money in my RSPs, TFSAs, whatever it is, put my kids in dance class. But I can know that, hey, if I do my normal amount of effort, put some money in RSPs and TFSA every year, if I buy that home, I buy that one rental property, and I can average an 8% return, I can count on working towards having almost $2 million of extra net worth for retirement. As I said earlier, I really believe in that multi-tier strategy, or as Chris Harrison likes to say, being a table leg investor. The top of the table is your future. You want as many legs holding it as possible. The Smith Manoeuvre is one of them. Real estate investing is another. Participating whole life insurance for estate planning purposes might be another. GICs, the stock market, mutual funds, each one's a leg. And the more of those legs you can have, the more resilient your financial future will be, and the less you have to rely on any one of them. So for those of you wondering, the cash damming is a little bit more complex on paper, but at the end of the day, it's pretty straightforward. At least to a broker. But at the end of the day, you should understand this, but there's going to be experts that support you with this. So if you're like, oh, this is a lot, please, please, please don't just go do this. Surround yourself with people who can help you do it. Now, the only difference with the cash damming is that you have your rental property and it pays you rent. You take your rent check, you pay down your non-tax deductible mortgage with it, and you reborrow what you've paid down, and you service the expenses on that rental property. You have to be careful with this, because if your rental property is also a vacation property you live at, you can get into a lot of trouble. Oops, I did not mean to do that. It is a slightly more complex strategy in the sense that if you take your rental income that you need to pay your mortgage and you pay down the mortgage on your home with it, and it's your first time doing it, and the broker didn't explain things to you, well, maybe you're with Scotiabank. Well, one of the drawbacks to Scotiabank is it takes 60 to 90 days for that money to show up on your line of credit. Now, if your mortgage payment and your property taxes and your insurance are due in 5 days, you're going to experience something called stress, and it's going to suck. So make sure that if you do something like this, you really understand, you've tested it, you make sure that everything's working correctly. You ideally have some sort of expert or team of experts that are like, yep, all systems go. We've checked it over. We double checked. You look good. From experience, we're going to suggest, let's do $1,000 test this month just to make sure. You run the $1,000 test. Everything works great. Okay, then we can ramp it up. Once we've got everything running nice and smooth, it's just like a car idling. It doesn't take long. It's like turning the ignition on the key every month. In my experience, and for me personally, Smith Manoeuvre takes me about 10 to 15 minutes every month. Even the tracking is pretty basic. I have an Excel spreadsheet with 3 columns. You don't really need to track what you pay down. You just need to track what you borrow on your tax deductible line of credit. So I track anytime I take money off that and anytime I pay interest on it. So just once a month I do it. I plug in the Excel. $932 came out on this date, and the column is the account number, or the HELOC, home equity line of credit. Then I track column number 2 is my Smith Manoeuvre checking account. On this day, I deposited $982, corresponds with the other column, which is where the money came from. And then I track where the money went. The $982, I spent $82 on interest on the HELOC. The other $900 went to investment account 1, 2, 3. And to be really, really thorough, I'll probably write a little note. Maybe I invested in the S&P 500 index. Okay, great. That's the extent of my tracking. Now, I have an accountant that double checks everything at the end of the year, but I give him that Excel. And I also, the other thing I should add is every month I print a digital copy, a PDF of my home equity line of credit statement, my Smith Manoeuvre checking account, and whatever investment account I put the money in. I now have every possible record the CRA could ever want. It takes me about 2 minutes. I click, 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 click. save it into a Dropbox and usually on a thumb drive. I'm done. I moved the money, I tracked it, took 15 minutes, I'm on with my life, and now I feel good because I'm being proactive. So the steps to getting started, at least how I suggest you do it. The reality is you can go buy the book. You can even email me. I'll send you a free copy of the Smith Manoeuvre book. Let me see if I got a copy. You email me. I will send you a copy of this book for free. I didn't write it. It cost me money. I paid for the postage. But as I told you earlier, I believe in helping people where I can. So if you, whether you're watching this live, you're watching a recording on YouTube, even if you're a complete stranger, I don't even care if you're another mortgage broker. If you think that this will help you and you're interested in the book, send me an email and I'll send you a copy of the original book. What I suggest you do, reach out to me, reach out to another Smith Manoeuvre certified mortgage broker, because we are typically the first person you're going to want to speak to, because the entire strategy revolves around a certain type of mortgage, which is a readvanceable mortgage. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of the strategy. I'll discuss with you what your why is, why you're doing this. I'll do my best. I can't guarantee you should do the strategy, but I'll do my best to screen out if it's a mistake. And I am very vocal about it. Probably about 1 in 3 people I connect with, the strategy is the wrong choice for them, the wrong time, or the wrong stage in their life. And at the end of the day, I can't tell them what to do, but I strongly recommend they don't do it. So I'm not here that everyone who calls me is not going to get a 25-minute or 40-minute sales pitch, but rather let's have a discovery call. Let's figure out, is it a good fit for you? What are your options? Does it make sense? Right now, about 75% of the people that are connecting with me, we're setting dates, we're tracking the renewal, and I'm saying, hey, keep that low interest rate you have. And let's educate you on the strategy. I'll give you a book. I'll send you podcasts. If you're really, really curious, I'll even see if I can set up a call with Robinson Smith to ask the creator of the strategy, or I should say the son of the creator of the strategy, questions about it. I will do what I can to support you. Even if there's only a small chance I'm going to get paid in 4 years, I don't really care. I'm helping you. I'm reaching my goals. That's what makes me happy. And I really do believe that if you help enough people, the world will come together. And if you're trying to do good in the world, it'll happen. So the next thing you do is, if it is a good fit and it is a good time, you get pre-qualified. That's where we basically build a full file. We get all the documents. We make sure with a 99.9% accuracy that you will be able to set up the strategy. That's usually when we start pulling in the other experts. We get you connected with an accountant, a planner, whoever you need. My goal at the end of the day is to play traffic control. I'm not going to have all the answers, but I can help you dig up the questions and introduce you who the right people are. The next thing we do is, if the pre-qualification checks out, everything looks good, we get the right mortgage. We try to time that in a way to minimize penalties and fees, to maximize the results of the strategy. And that's one of the reasons why 3 out of 4 people I'm talking to right now, we're discussing, I'm spending time with you, helping you build a plan, helping you answer questions. I'm not pushing you to do a mortgage today, tomorrow, next month. My goal is build a relationship. Your renewal is going to come up. Why not build a relationship? Show you that I actually care about you. Take the time to invest without getting paid. I'll buck up first and put my time in to do what's right for you. And in 3 years, 2 years, whatever it is, I'll reach out 6 months before and we'll discuss. Okay, great. You're 6 months out. You've had 2 years to research the strategy. Awesome. Is it a good time? What's changed? And we'll set it up. And then once it's all set up, at least in my personal experience, it takes about 15 minutes a month to do. So really, what's next for me, because this is the end of it, guys. I'm going to try to keep this relatively quick, is my next focus come the new year, after baby's born, I've got a little bit of time to breathe, is we've discussed how can you make more assets and investments for your future. The next thing I want to dive into is, how can we minimize the taxes when we start taking those assets, and how can we leave more of them to our kids, to our future? And we've already created it. I just got to make it look good. But in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to send out a email with a link. We're going to create a Facebook community, and we're building a bit of a YouTube channel. I have no interest in being famous or popular, but I want to create a database of this information, and I want to create a community that's not based on convincing you to invest in real estate or buy a home or to invest in the stock market or anything like that, but rather a place where curated experts can come in and share tips and advice and identify problems you may not be aware of and show solutions. So I'm going to kick out of the presentation, but these are my contact details. If you have any questions, you can reach myself or my business partner, Scott Brennan, and we can connect. And I will do my best to help you, even if you don't have a mortgage. That's fine. I'm not here to do this to try to make money. It's a side effect. Don't get me wrong. It's great when it happens. But if I can help you, if you're not sure, you even want a second opinion, let me know and I'll do my best. Hey, now it's big me again, and I can actually see your guys' questions. So if you have any questions, let me know. I want to ask 2 quick polls. Feel free to answer them or not, but I just want an understanding of where everyone's at. So one is, if you have a minute, let me know. I want to know, are interest rates rising impacting you? Are they causing you to stress? Are they the difference if you're worried about paying groceries or not? So it's going to take about 20 seconds to get an understanding. I'm going to mute myself and blow my nose because I am suffering right now. Awesome. So people are still answering, so I'm just going to give it another minute or 2. So far, about 70% of you have answered, so we're climbing. I'll wait till it stalls out. We'll know how many people are asleep at the wheel. Okay, looks like we've got it. So there we go. I think I've made it so that you can all see this, but just to give everyone an idea of, hey, there's some people in this room right now, and they are wondering how they can improve their future. Well, what are other people like that like? So about 1/5 of us aren't worried. One person, and whoever you are, if you need any help at all, please reach out, whether it's tax related, it's planning related, mortgage related. If you really, really are in distress, I will do my best. I will ask Graham or Chris to give you free advice. I will do whatever I can to help you solve if you're really that close to the breaking point and you're worried. For those of you that it's starting to impact you, my advice is think ahead. And for those of you it hasn't impacted you yet, my advice is to think ahead. It's really important to know at what point are you going to reach that breaking point. I have one other thing I want to ask you real quick. This is 2 questions. I got really greedy and cheeky, but this is the last one, by the way. And then I'm going to rattle through all the questions that you guys have asked, and you guys are free to go whenever you like. I'm going to post this recording and send it out to everybody. But I really do appreciate you guys taking a minute to share and giving me a better understanding of how I can help you and show things that make your lives easier or answer questions that you may have. So I got distracted by someone asking me a cheeky question. So I'll give this about 10 seconds. I'll end the poll, share the results, and then I will rattle through your guys' questions. So, and whoever's asking me questions anonymously, I'm going to assume you're Scott Brennan. Perfect. We're almost there. Cool. I'm going to share the results on this as well. So about 1 in 4 of us are investing, I assume, for ourselves, or we're not investing. About 1/3 of us, which thumbs up, because I really think it's a mistake when people completely center the retirement around their kids and really hurt themselves financially. About 1/3 of us are trying to create something for our kids, but we're our number 1 priority. And I kind of fall 50-50 into that. And the last option, which is my kids are my main priority. I have a feeling is going to flip-flop, but that's part of the plan, changing as you go. And 70% of us are worried about one of our family members' financial stability. So over the years, I've anecdotally learned that I'm not alone in it, but it is nice to see it confirmed statistically, at least with a small sample size, that, hey, this is a prominent thing, and that a lot of us are worried about what our families are going to do. So I'm going to rattle through these questions because it is getting late for everybody and I am sick. Someone is asking, if a mortgage is joint, does the investment count have to be joint as well? Now, this is referring to if you own a home together and you borrow on that asset, do you have to invest together? You should confirm with an accountant, but I have heard accountants advise that, or let me word this in a better way, make sure that my managing broker doesn't get too upset. You should ask your accountant if you can invest you're both sharing risk. You can both allocate money into different investment accounts. And I would ask if one spouse could invest into an account more heavily than the other. But I do believe the more you shift the returns onto a certain individual, the more you risk the CRA getting upset, and the more important it is to have a rationale why it was done a certain way. Simply saying that my spouse is at a 0% tax bracket because they don't work and I'm at a 40% tax bracket, so then I put all the investments in my spouse's name, that's going to get you into trouble. So short answer is talk to your accountant. It is really situational. Someone asked, is Brennan as good looking as Kirkwood? When does he get to go on one of these? That was why I was laughing earlier. I appreciate the compliment, whoever you are. Someone's asking if I'm located in BC or Alberta. So May 12th, I moved to just outside of Edmonton because I do try to practice what I preach. And the idea of owning a $2 million home and really putting my family in an uncomfortable situation was just not something that was a priority for me. So I moved to Alberta. But I am dually licensed. I am in the final stages of getting my license transferred to Alberta. And I still have my BC license and will be maintaining it. The more handsome half of Kirkwood Brennan, Scott Brennan, the almost actor, is also located right in Vancouver. So all my family's in BC. I'm out there regularly. We're dually licensed in BC and Alberta. We're considering getting our Ontario license, but that's to be determined. Now, someone is asking how cash damming affects your borrowing. Will it have an impact on qualifying? Yes. The Smith Manoeuvre, whether it's cash damming or the regular Smith Manoeuvre, will both impact your qualifying power. And that's why it's important to have someone analyzing and understanding your goals and looking at how will this impact you. Lowering your taxes, but completely destroying your goal of building a portfolio of 20 properties is probably not worth it. So it's important to balance it. Now, I want to add, you can almost mitigate 100% of the qualifying impact if you do it correctly. There's ways to re-amortize your mortgage out to its natural amortization. And there are ways that you can convert the HELOC debt to get better qualifying. But I'll share with you guys a little bit of a quirk right now. Home equity lines of credit are qualifying at the benchmark rate of 5.25% at a 25-year amortization. So they actually qualify per $100,000, about $200 a month lower in payments than a 30-year amortization mortgage right now with the stress test. So my goal, and a lot of you have probably seen that CIBC special, or CBC, I should say, not CIBC, the CBC special on mortgage fraud. I am not cool with that. I'll warn you right now, if you call me and like, hey, yeah, I'm getting my T4s done up, what number should I pick? I'll report you. I am very protective of the integrity of this industry and the community. And at the end of the day, taking out some mortgage you can't afford is going to lead to you losing your house and being in a really bad situation. People who actually qualify for mortgages struggle sometimes. So there's my little commercial. Please don't call me with any of that stuff. I'm not interested. But as a broker, my goal is to understand policy and to know the best way to apply your goals to get the best outcome possible. And hey, if home equity line of credits qualify at a lower rate because of the way the policies are written right now, as a professional, my job is to know that so that we can figure out how we get you to your goals the most effective way possible. So long story short, the Smith Manoeuvre does impact your borrowing power, but you can mitigate most of it. The next question is, in the case of a rental property and cash damming, over time, the home total debt will remain the same because of the Smith Manoeuvre and the debt on the rental property will have come down. Are we able to transfer more of the home debt to the rental property to keep that one maxed out and drop the non-tax deductible debt significantly in one shot? So what they're asking is, can I move non-tax deductible debt? So we'll use an example. You get a re-advanceable mortgage product on your rental property. You're going to get room on your line of credit as you pay off the debt on the rental property. Can you use that line of credit on your rental property to pay off your non-tax deductible debt? You can do it, but you're going to pay off non-tax deductible debt and create non-tax deductible debt. So there will be no benefit. So you didn't mention your name, but the person who's asking, you could do it, but there's no benefit. It's important to remember it's not the source of the funds that decides tax deductibility or not. It's the purpose of the funds. You have to have the reasonable expectation of earning income from what you do. just in general, what makes it not make sense for someone? So I assume you're referring to the Smith Maneuver in general. The biggest things would be lack of timeline. If you're 75, the Smith Maneuver may not make sense. And now I have seen some people argue that if you're in a situation where you have no retirement and you have nothing to lose and you're going to work until the day you can't, I've seen some people advocate for the strategy may be acceptable. I am really reserved on that opinion personally. I think it's case by case. I think at the end of the day, we're all adults and we can make decisions on what risks we want to take. But I think that as you get older, your degree of caution with the strategy needs to go up exponentially. Another one would be someone who's got a really low degree of stability to their income. Maybe they're a developer and they buy a home, they spend 2 years with a lot of costs renovating it, they sell, they make a big profit, they repeat. That individual probably doesn't want to do the Smith Maneuver because adding on more risk is only going to magnify the downside of what they do already. Someone's asking if I'm going to email out a recording of this. Yes, but I have to finish this, upload it, edit out just the beginning and the end, and then upload it to YouTube. Typically takes a couple hours. So this will probably get uploaded tomorrow night or Friday night, but I will send this out to everybody. So someone's asking, what stops the bank from cash calling the line of credit in the middle of the Smith Maneuver? Is that a real fear for the strategy? The short answer is yes. Lines of credit or home equity lines of credit are demand loans, and a bank can ask for the money at any point. The more complex answer is it's been that way for a very, very long time. As long as lines of credit have existed, there's never been a mass recall of them in Canada, to my knowledge. It has happened in the US. This is a debated thing on the strategy. I think one of the best ways to mitigate it is a product that allows multiple mortgages and multiple lines of credit. So you can lock in that home equity line of credit to a variable mortgage at a lower interest rate, start paying off the debt, and eliminate the concern they're going to call or close your HELOC or home equity line of credit. That's how I do it personally. But yes, if you built up 65% of the debt or the value of your property as a home equity line of credit, you do run a risk that one day they ask for the money back. Now, there are ways to mitigate it. There are ways to structure it so that it's very unlikely. And there is one thought experiment that I use with clients to address this. One of the biggest concerns and the times this will usually happen is during a recession and when values drop. The bank's worst case scenario is that you go into foreclosure and they lose money. Now, if you owe 80% of the value of your property from when you bought it, and your property was worth $1 million, you owe $800,000. The market drops. Maybe it's worth $750,000 at the time. Knowing that the bank's worst case scenario is you go into foreclosure and losing money. And if you keep things up to date and the bank sees you've got assets and the bank sees you've got good credit, good income, you made all your payments on time, are they going to force their worst case scenario by calling your loan and forcing you to potentially, if you don't pay them back, their only solution is to go to foreclosure? Are they going to force that solution? And I can say from a common sense perspective, I think it's very unlikely, but you'll have to answer that question yourself. Someone's asking if I take clients from Quebec. No, I don't. But if you send me an email, there is a broker that I know out there who specializes in the Smith Maneuver and is certified that does really good work. And I send all my Quebec clients to him. Do I think it's a good moment to buy an investment property? If you're going to buy an average property, no, I do not think it's a good time. Like if you're just going to go pick a property, I like it, it's nice. No, don't do it. Rates are going up. Things are changing. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market. That being said, I think that if you have a degree of understanding of real estate and real estate investing, if you're working with people that are genuine and going to say, I don't think it's a good time to buy an investment property to a group of people and put it on the internet. Sorry, fighting this cold. And you decide you can trust those people and you surround yourself with them. I do think that there is a lot of opportunity if you look for properties that have tangible qualities that carry long-term value. So an example would be a property that is on the edge of where it's going to get rezoned to be apartment buildings, let's say. Maybe it's in Abbotsford, and we know there's a huge demand to increase density. And you're able to buy a property that you can expect in the next 5 to 10 years it's going to get rezoned. And maybe it's 40% cheaper right now. You can find a property with a beautiful lot, and you know you're a real estate investor when you get excited about lots, but maybe it's 300 feet long and 100 feet deep, and you have the experts or the knowledge or have done the research to know that, hey, you could divide that into 6 lots and you could build 6 skinny homes on it. That'd be another reason. So long story short, if you can invest where you're investing long-term for value, and you know that that property will do better than any other 9 properties on average because it has characteristics that will drive value long-term, it's a great time to invest in real estate. On the assumption that you're patient, you're calculated, and you're calm. If you find the property, you buy it. If you don't, too bad, so sad, but you're willing to be patient. What is the minimum household income for which the Smith Maneuver is worth doing, considering the cost of interest on the HELOC plus experts to help it be needed? I don't think there's a minimum income needed, but there is a certain stability. So you need to have at least enough income to be comfortable with your situation long-term. If you're financially stressed to a very high degree based on your current payments, and those payments are only going to go up, probably not a good time to commit to the Smith Maneuver. It's important to note that lower income individuals may be relying on their investments more to retire because maybe they don't have a good pension or they're able to invest less. Well, the Smith Maneuver is one part tax benefit, and that will be reduced for someone with a low income. But it's also one part, it frees up money that you wouldn't otherwise have. So if you've got a really stable situation, stable income, but you don't have a lot of money to put towards retirement, the Smith Maneuver might open up an extra $1,000 a month you can put towards retirement sooner. And it could make all the difference of if you have a retirement or not. So it's not so much a minimum income, but does your situation fit well for the strategy? And do you have a degree of stability? Someone's asking, can the cash flow dam work when the rental is owned outright as 1/3 owner? My primary is mortgage, my wife who's not on title for the rental. You're going to want to talk to an accountant on that. There's 2 answers to this. The first answer is cash damming. You can only reborrow to cover the expenses. If the property is owned outright, and I believe by that you mean there's no mortgage, there's less expenses to service. So the short answer is you can do it in a reduced capacity. You need to dig into if you're only a 33% owner, you got to talk to someone like Chris Harrison and figure out what the nuances are of that situation and that you do it correctly. Now, the other thing to consider, though, is you're in a situation where if it is paid off, you're getting a lot of free cash flow. You've got very little expenses, and then you're getting a bunch of money to, what are you going to do with it? You get $5,000 a month, you spend $2,000 on expenses, you've got $3,000 left over, and it's going to get taxed because it's income. Well, what I would suggest you investigate is it worth taking that $3,000 or whatever that surplus money is, paying down your non-tax deductible debt, then reborrowing and investing? You're just optimizing the flow of funds. So it's all case by case. Someone is in Ontario. Can we help them? Yes, let's chat and we'll see if we're a good fit and we can help you. We are very close to getting our license out there. And if we don't, we do have experts that we can connect you with. So let's chat and we'll figure out what the best solution is. Someone is saying, do you think later in 2023 will be ripe to get deals on rental properties? And do one of your experts help me find homes to invest in? I think that as rates rise, there will be better opportunities and more opportunities. A little thought exercise that I use for myself and share with clients is a very expensive house at a low interest rate has a lot of downside because interest rates can't go a whole lot lower, which is something that increases values, but they can go up. And you also carry a lot more debt with that. It was one of the reasons why I was very uncomfortable buying a home in Abbotsford. The idea of owing a lot of money at a low interest rate really scared me because if rates go up, my income drops, values drop, cost goes up. That being said, buying a cheaper asset that costs the same overall because interest rates have risen. So let's say that same $1 million home comes down because rates go up. The overall cost of ownership is the same, but you can now buy it for $500,000 and have $400,000 of debt on it. Well, we know that as rates rise, it gets harder and harder for them to continue to rise. And there's a good chance it'll come down at some point. When rates come down, the values go up. So I will argue that I believe personally that the higher rates go, the better of an opportunity real estate investing will be, assuming it's the right property for the right reasons and that the price is correct relative to the change in interest rates. There was an article that I wrote that shows that we need to build an extra, it's over 5 million units of housing by 2030 to meet the demand of the growing population and to have what's deemed affordable housing, which is 44% of the income to the cost of home ownership in BC as an example. 44% of your income to the cost of home ownership is beyond the maximum debt servicing ratios that lenders even allow for a mortgage. So it's important to note that values are likely going to continue rising long-term, not because I'm a broker and I want it to happen, but because the demand for families, the number of families is growing at a faster rate than they're creating housing, which is creating this vacuum where you're getting 100 families fighting over 80 homes. And we see what happens. It creates bidding wars, vacancy hits 0.5%. It's harder to get into an exclusive nightclub than it is to go look at a viewing on a 2-bedroom condo. And that problem is not getting solved anytime soon. In addition to them needing to create, they're on track to create, I believe, 2.8 million units of housing between now and 2030. They need to increase it by over 3 million for a total of 5-point-something million units of housing, according to CMHC. And we are at a 20-year low for construction workers and people that build houses. The CMHC study, they basically said, we don't know what the solution is. We know there's a problem. Drastic change needs to happen. We need to do further research before we can suggest a solution. So long term, I think that real estate investing is going to be sound because the demand is just going to keep growing. Someone has a fixed rate 5-year mortgage, 4 years left at 194 before expiration. Does it make sense to pay down the mortgage up to 20% annually and invest? Or they said rather than investing. Home prices didn't have a huge run up in my location, so unlikely to follow large amounts and invest discretionally. Long story short, if you're going to pay down a 2% mortgage and reborrow at 6% to invest, situationally, it could make sense, but practically it may not. And I would lean towards, if someone's got a 2% mortgage, if you're seriously behind on your investing, maybe there's an argument there. But 9 out of 10 times, personally, I would lean towards you're probably best just enjoy that mortgage. I wouldn't really worry if you've got 4 years at under 2% left. I would focus on things like maxing TFSAs. If you're going to put money into RSPs or RSPs, doing that. In 4 years, start worrying about this. Trying to pay down a 2% mortgage you've got 4 years on. At the end of the day, you're only really earning a 1.94% return in this situation. So ultimately seek advice from an investment advisor, an expert, which I'm not. I'm a mortgage broker. But in that situation, I wouldn't make any changes. Someone's asking, how does cash dam work if their expenses exceed the revenue for the year? Let's say roof replacement for the year. At the end of the day, if the property does not generate enough revenue to service the expenses, you're going to have to come up with that money out of your own pocket either way. You're either going to borrow it from somewhere else, or you're going to have to pay for it out of your own pocket. So it would be the same. You would cash dam the expenses you can. Now, and someone said, can you discuss the floor plan option you mentioned at the beginning of the session? Maybe I'm tired and sick. I remember building a foundation and discussing that. Basically, what a foundation, in my opinion, is a general idea of what you're trying to do, when and why. Having a budget done and a firm understanding of your current financial situation and how it will change. Having at least a basic tax, estate, and investment strategy built out. And then having a means of how you're going to execute it. I would say that that's kind of the minimum foundation of you want to have built. Those tools put together will then allow you to decide what risks you want to take, how you're going to invest, what strategies make sense. And if any of you have any other questions, if anything's private or personal, or you're not sure how to explain it, please feel free to reach out to me. I will send out the recording to everybody who signed up in the next couple of days. I'll include a link if you want to book a call. But we are at the end. So I want to say thank you all for coming out. And if you do need anything at all, please reach out. If you are that one person who said you are in major distress, please reach out. And if there's anything I can do, let me know. Bye for now, everybody.